I grew up on that land. It wasn't just soil and grass to me. It was my family's history. My grandfather had bought the 200 acres after the war, carved a life out of nothing, and taught me every inch of it. The scent of wild cedar after rain, the curve of the creek that swelled in spring, the small dam that my father built to control the water flow for our crops. When my parents passed, the land became mine. I paid my taxes, I fenced it off, and I took care of it like a guardian. Then one day, a bright white sign appeared at the southern fence line. Future site of Willow Creek Estates, 35 luxury homes. I thought it was a prank, until the bulldozers showed up. The men in hard hats told me they had permits, that the HOA for this future neighborhood had already been formed, that my property, my land, was rezoned and sold to a developer. I laughed in their faces. Then I drove to the county office, thinking there had been some kind of mistake. There was no mistake. A year earlier, during some emergency zoning adjustment hearing I was never told about, a chunk of my land was reclassified. The developer bought it for pennies, and somehow my name on the deed had been overlooked. The clerk, avoiding eye contact, muttered something about legal proceedings and eminent domain. I hired a lawyer. She told me straight. They've got you buried in paperwork. Fighting them will cost you more than the land is worth. And even then, you'll probably lose. By the time I returned home, they had already poured the foundations for 3 houses. Willow Creek Estates wasn't even finished when the HOA started sending me letters. Apparently, my remaining land, the 60 acres around my house and the dam, was now adjacent to the community and subject to aesthetic guidelines. They didn't like my fence. They didn't like my shed. They didn't like my dog barking when their kids wandered onto my property. The worst was Karen. Yes, her real name. She was the HOA president, a short-haired, sharp-jawed woman who treated the subdivision like her personal kingdom. She showed up at my gate in a red blazer, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "You'll need to remove that barn," she said without so much as a hello. "It's an eyesore." I stared at her for a full 5 seconds. "That barn was built in 1954. It's older than your entire neighborhood." She smiled, the kind of smile people give when they know something you don't. "Oh, we'll see about that." A week later, I got a violation notice in the mail. Then another. And another. They even tried to fine me for grass exceeding regulation height. I ignored them. They sued me. The court dismissed it. My land wasn't under their jurisdiction. But that didn't stop the harassment. Their construction crews accidentally cut my fence more than once. They dumped debris near my creek. One day, I found tire tracks across my hayfield where someone had driven an ATV. Still, I kept my cool. I watched. I waited. And then I noticed something they hadn't. The homes of Willow Creek Estates were built right on the floodplain. Not just any floodplain. My floodplain. The creek that ran through my property also ran under their streets, their driveways, and their brand-new backyards. The only thing keeping it under control was the small dam my father had built decades ago. A dam that sat entirely on my land. They never asked permission to tie their drainage into my water system. They just did it. For months, I thought about it. About how the HOA had stolen my land, humiliated me, and treated me like I was the trespasser. I also thought about the dam's old manual release gate, a heavy steel wheel that controlled how much water flowed downstream. Normally, I kept it at 20%, enough to keep the creek steady. But if I opened it fully after a week of rain, well, let's just say the Willow Creek in their neighborhood name would suddenly be very accurate. Was it legal? Probably not. Was it satisfying to think about? Absolutely. Then came the day that pushed me over the edge. I returned from town to find my mailbox smashed, my private property signs torn down, and spray paint on my barn. HOA rules. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee, listening to the rain hammer the tin roof. By morning, the dam's reservoir was swollen, the water dark and restless. I grabbed my coat. The dam stood silent in the mist, the wheel cold under my hands. Downstream, I could see the rooftops of Willow Creek Estates. I turned the wheel, slowly at first, just to hear the groan of metal, the rush of water building. Then faster, until the gate was wide open. The roar was immediate. The creek transformed into a raging river, tearing downstream with a hunger it hadn't felt in years. By the time I reached my porch, the first alarms were sounding. Cars were honking, dogs barking, people shouting. Karen stood in the middle of her pristine cul-de-sac, water rising around her ankles, still holding that damned clipboard. "Shut it off!" she screamed when she saw me. I just leaned on the railing, coffee mug in hand, and watched. The water filled the streets, poured into garages, swallowed manicured lawns. A couple of the brand-new basements were underwater within an hour. By sunset, the entire lower half of the subdivision looked like a lake. I didn't open the dam all the way. I wasn't trying to destroy everything, just remind them who really controlled this land. When the county came knocking, I told them the truth. Heavy rain, old dam, malfunctioning gate. They couldn't prove otherwise. Willow Creek Estates still exists today, but they never built another house near my property. The HOA leaves me alone now, and every time I hear the creek rushing past my land,